21.5 million people. That's how many had their most sensitive files, the deep background checks you fill out for a security clearance, stolen from the Office of Personnel Management back in 2015. And here's the number that should actually stop you. For more than a year, the attackers were inside that network, moving around, and not one alarm ever fired. Sit with that, because it's the whole episode. The expensive failure in security isn't usually the sensor that stayed silent. It's the year nobody was watching, or the alarm that screamed and got swiped away. And by the end of this, you'll be able to spot that exact alarm in a raw log with your own eyes. That one skill, reading the alarm, is the whole difference between the analysts who stop a breach and a year of silence like OPMs.
Jasmine jumping in, an OPM wasn't a freak accident. Mandiant measures this every year. Right now, the typical attacker sits inside a network about 14 days before anyone notices. Painful, sure, but a decade ago that number was over 200 days. Monitoring is the entire reason that SCAP closed, and it's exactly what Objective 4.4 is about.
K here, and let me put a number on why this matters before we scope it. Domain 4 is 28% of the whole exam, the single biggest slice. Roughly 1 in 4 questions comes from security operations, and monitoring sits right at its heart. CompTIA even tells you what you're watching. 3 surfaces. Systems, meaning your servers and endpoints. Applications, the software on them. And infrastructure, the network and cloud underneath. And each surface logs different things worth knowing. Systems give you logins and process starts. Applications give you transactions and errors. Infrastructure gives you traffic flows and firewall hits. Miss one surface and you've handed an attacker a blind spot to live in.
And the handbook lists the activities you run across those surfaces, so memorize the chain. Kim here. Aggregate the logs, alert, scan, report, archive. Each one's a noun the exam can ask about alone. But watch the step that hides at the end because it's the one OPM skipped for a year. After an alert fires comes respond, remediate, and validate. A human acts, you fix the cause, then you confirm the fix actually held. And scanning sits in that chain too. You're not just waiting for alarms, you're actively sweeping for weak spots and policy drift before they become one. Aggregate, alert, scan, report, archive, then respond, remediate, validate. Learn that order cold because a favorite question hands you the steps out of sequence and asks which comes next.
So don't let a shiny dashboard fool you on test day. The exam grades the whole pipeline, not just the box called a security information and event management, collection, correlation, alerting, and the human at the very end. Miss any link and the chain snaps, and the most expensive breaches in history are all stories about that last link.
And let's draw a clean line around today because 3 other videos in this series touch nearby ground. What you do after the alarm. The full incident response lifecycle. That's its own episode. Digging through logs and packets to reconstruct an attack. Another one. Scanning for the holes in the first place. A third. Today is the pipeline that feeds all 3. How the signal gets collected and raised in the first place. Get that boundary clear and a whole cluster of domain 4 questions stops blurring together. Monitoring raises the flag. The other 3 decide what happens after it's up.
And it helps to see that pipeline as one shape before we build each piece. Trace it left to right. The raw sources on the left feed aggregation. Aggregation feeds the security information and event management that correlate. Correlation raises the alert, and the alert finally reaches a human who acts.
Before we build it, here's the question sitting under almost every security information and event management video, and it frames the whole thing. If we already collect all the logs, why do we still miss the attack? The data was right there the entire time, so why the year of silence at OPM?
That's the thread we'll pull all episode. Next, we build the security information and event management itself, the engine that's supposed to catch what the logs are screaming. And a heads up before we go deep, every domain we teach has free practice quizzes waiting at certs.professorerica.com, so once this clicks, go drill domain 4 before test day. It's the biggest slice of the exam, and monitoring shows up all over it, so the practice reps pay off fast. Let's go build the engine. So a security information and event management is 3 verbs in order, and that order answers almost every security information and event management question on the exam. Aggregate, correlate, alert. Say it exactly like that, and the trick wording falls apart. Everything else in this scene hangs off those 3 words, so if you remember nothing else today, remember the order they run in. Jasmine, give us where this thing came from.
The name tells you what it's for: security information and event management. It was fused from 2 older ideas, log management and event management, into one console so an analyst sees the whole picture in one place instead of hunting across 10. And this is where that picture lives.
Aggregation is verb 1, and it's the plumbing. You pull logs from everywhere into one collector, and the list of sources is longer than people think. Operating system logs, application logs, firewall and IDS logs, authentication and directory logs, cloud audit trails, even physical badge readers. If it generates an event, it can feed the pipeline. Picture a data center like this one, every box in it quietly forwarding what it sees into one searchable place.
And here's the step beginners skip: normalization. Every device writes logs its own way. A Cisco firewall looks nothing like a Windows event. The security information and event management rewrites them all into one common schema on the way in, so one search for one user works across every source at once. Skip that step and correlation is impossible.
Verb 2 is correlation, and it's where the magic is. Correlation links events across sources into one story. A failed login on a server, plus a connection from a strange country, plus a brand new admin account. 3 boring lines apart, one loud alarm together. That's the leap a security information and event management makes that a stack of separate log files never can. Any one of those events alone is background noise you'd scroll right past. Chained in the right order inside a few minutes, they're an account takeover in progress. Correlation is the difference between drowning in data and seeing the story it's telling.
Now, how do the logs even reach the collector? 2 ways, and CompTIA tests the difference constantly. An agent is a small program installed on the host that pushes its logs out. Agentless installs nothing, and the security information and event management reaches out and pulls the device remotely. Here's the trade-off side by side.
So an agent gives you richer data and still works when the host is firewalled off, but it's one more thing to install, update, and break. Agentless is lighter to deploy, but you only get whatever the device will hand over when asked. So here's the exam's rule of thumb. If a scenario needs deep, continuous data from a critical server, especially one behind a firewall, you want an agent. If it's a light check across a fleet of network gear you can't install software on, agentless fits. Depth versus reach every time.
And the engine correlating all this runs on rules. A correlation rule is just an if-then in plain speech. If 5 failed logins from one address, then a success, then a new account, all inside 10 minutes raise a high-severity alert, the security information and event management watches thousands of those at once, which no human could.
So the security information and event management is really just a very fast, very literal rule follower.
Exactly, and that literalness is why tuning matters so much later. But hold that thought. 2 more activities the exam names by their nouns. Archiving keeps logs for compliance and forensics. You might be legally required to retain a year of them, and after an incident, the archive is how you rebuild what happened.
And reporting is the quiet one at the end of the list. Reporting turns raw events into something a human actually reads. A dashboard, a weekly summary, a compliance attestation. The board doesn't read syslog, they read the report.
One last thing so the names aren't a mystery on test day, the security information and event management products you'll hear are Splunk, the Elastic Stack people call the ELK stack, Microsoft Sentinel, and QRadar. CompTIA won't make you pick a vendor. It just wants you to know they all run those same 3 verbs underneath. The brand changes, the pipeline doesn't.
And notice the last box in that pipeline is still a person. Aggregate, correlate, alert, and then a human acts. OPM built the first 3 and left the 4th dark for a year. So next, let's go stare at the exact thing the security information and event management stares at. Raw logs in a real terminal.
Before we keep going, one small favor that actually moves the needle. If this is landing for you, tap like, then subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the rest. 2 taps, completely free, and it pushes this in front of more people who need it.
Enough theory. The reason this channel beats a slide deck is that we go under the hood. Everything a security information and event management does starts life as plain text in a log file, so let me show you what it's actually reading.
And stick with this next part because it's the beat that makes the whole objective click. Once you watch an attack appear in a raw log with your own eyes, every abstract word from the last scene snaps into place. These are the logs streaming in by the thousand.
We're on an isolated lab box we own and are authorized to use, the way you'd learn this for a defensive job. No real victim, just our own server, so you can see the exact lines an analyst hunts for. On Linux, every login attempt lands in the authentication log, so let me tail it live and watch events stream in.
That's calm, healthy traffic. One good login, one routine command. This is the baseline, and an analyst has to know what calm looks like before they can spot the storm.
Quick note, because the exam may word it either way, on most current distributions, the same events also live in the systemd journal, which you read with journalctl instead of opening the flat file. Same data, different front door, and a security information and event management ingests both.
Now watch the storm. Same file, but I'll filter for just the failures with grep, because the indicator here is repetition. The brute force fingerprint is one source address failing over and over.
There it is, plain as day, one address, 203.0.113.7, hammering different usernames in the same second. Root, admin, Oracle, test. That's a machine guessing, not a tired employee fumbling their own password.
And read one line's anatomy because every field matters in an investigation. The timestamp tells you when, the host name tells you which server, the process tells you the service that logged it, then the user and source IP tell you who tried what from where. That structure is exactly what a security information and event management parses and indexes.
And I can count it instantly. Let me pipe that into a tally so the security information and event management logic gets obvious. This one line is the entire detection in miniature.
247 failures from one address against 3 from everyone else. The signal's screaming. That ratio is the whole job, and a security information and event management query just runs this same grep across millions of lines and thousands of hosts at once.
And here's what that automation looks like in a real security information and event management. This is Splunk's search language, SPL, the same logic we just ran by hand, only it watches every host and alerts the instant the count crosses a threshold.
Read it top to bottom and it's plain English. Find the failed passwords, pull the source IP, count them per IP, show only the ones over 50. Same detective work, same indicator, just at machine scale, and this pattern has a formal name every analyst references. So let me pull up the real attacker playbook. What we just caught is technique T1110, brute force, filed under credential access in the MITRE ATT&CK knowledge base. The grep we ran is a detection for this exact technique, and notice the sub-techniques: password guessing, cracking, spraying, and credential stuffing.
And here's the gut punch, straight back to the cold open. These are the same kind of logs OPM had, and Target after them. The signal was right there, the tool even drew a box around it, and the only thing between a breach and a shrug was a human reading the line. K, keep that terminal up. Let me get someone who knows Security Operations Center triage cold on the line.
Happy to jump in. A new analyst doesn't drown because the tool is bad. They drown because nobody tuned the rules, so the real line is one red row in a sea of red rows.
So on a live shift, what's the actual first move when one of these fires?
You make the screen quieter, you don't hunt harder. And when a real one lands, don't wipe the box. Grab the who, the when, and the where off that line first, before you destroy the evidence of how far in they got.
So why not auto-block every address that fails a login and skip the human?
Because you'd lock out your own payroll server the Monday a service account expires, and a real attacker just rotates addresses anyway. Automate the obvious, escalate the ambiguous. That's the job. Thanks for having me on.
That's the field reality the exam keeps circling. Detection is only half of it. Once you've got the offending address, you block it, at the firewall or on the host, and that's the move OPM never made in time. Thanks, Rourke.
6 tools. CompTIA names each by acronym in 4.4, and every one is a near guaranteed point if you know the single job it does. Let's nail them so the trick wording can't touch you. Jasmine, start us on the scary-looking one.
Start with a scary-looking one that's actually simple. SCAP, the Security Content Automation Protocol. It's a NIST standard that lets different tools speak one language about vulnerabilities and configuration. It standardizes scanning against benchmarks, and a benchmark is just a hardening checklist, like the CISSP benchmark for Windows. SCAP lets a scanner read that checklist and report, in a machine format, which boxes pass and which fail. In the real world, that's how a government shop proves it's compliant. A SCAP validated scanner reads a DIS-ASTIG or a CIS benchmark and spits out a report. This host passes. That one's misconfigured. No two auditors arguing about wording. No spreadsheet filled in by hand. The standard does the talking.
And if a question drills into SCAP, it's really a family, and you've met most of it already. CVE names the flaw. CVSS scores how bad it is. CPE names the affected product. And the rules ride in formats with names like OVAL and XCCDF. Don't memorize the formats. Just know SCAP is the umbrella over them. So if an answer choice pairs automated, standardized compliance scanning with a benchmark, SCAP is almost always the word they're fishing for. Now 2 tools people swap on the exam, so here's the line precisely. Data loss prevention watches data leaving. Antivirus watches files on the host. Data loss prevention inspects content heading out the door, an email, an upload, a USB copy, and blocks the customer list before it leaves. Antivirus inspects files sitting on the machine for malware. One guards the exit, the other guards the floor. If a question is about a customer list getting emailed out, that's data loss prevention. If it's about a malicious file already on the disk, that's antivirus.
And data loss prevention goes deeper if a scenario pushes on it. It protects data in 3 states the exam names: at rest on a drive, in transit across the network, and in use open in an application. Good data loss prevention covers all 3, which is why it's more than an email filter. Quick partner note on antivirus too. Old antivirus is signature-based, matching files against known bad fingerprints. Modern endpoint tools add behavior detection, watching what a file does so they catch malware nobody's ever seen.
Now the network pair, and this is the most tested confusion in the whole objective. An SNMP. Trap is the device shouting on its own. Its agent watches a threshold, and the moment it's crossed, it fires an unsolicited message at the manager. Push, not pull. NetFlow is the opposite question. It doesn't care about a device's health. It cares about conversations. Who talked to whom, when, on what port, how many bytes. It's the phone bill of your network. And here they are side by side.
And here's the single most missed fact in 4.4, so burn it in. NetFlow is metadata, not packet contents. It records the flow, the who and how much, but never the payload. If a question asks which tool reads the actual data inside the packet, NetFlow is the wrong answer. That's full packet capture.
And here's why NetFlow earns its place anyway beyond being a phone bill. Flow analysis catches data exfiltration. If a quiet internal server suddenly ships gigabytes out to some unknown address at 3 in the morning, NetFlow sees that volume and direction even though it never reads 1 byte of the stolen data. The pattern alone is the alarm. Once it's charted, it's obvious.
Last one. The proactive tool. A vulnerability scanner like Nessus or OpenVAS probes your hosts for known weaknesses and missing patches, then hands you the list to fix before an attacker finds it. It's the smoke detector you test on purpose. Two exam nuances here. An authenticated scan, where you hand the scanner credentials, sees far more than an unauthenticated one peeking from outside because it can read the actual patch levels. And after you fix a finding, you rescan to validate it's truly gone. That rescan closes the same loop we opened at the start: respond, remediate, then confirm.
And one connection the exam quietly rewards. Remember agent versus agentless from Scene 2? SNMP is the classic agentless style monitoring. The device exposes its own counters and the manager reads them, nothing extra pushed onto it. So when a question pairs SNMP with a monitoring approach, agentless is usually the word it wants. That kind of cross-topic link, tying a tool back to a concept from an earlier scene, is exactly how the harder questions get built.
So here's the trap most test takers walk into, and it's the perfect bridge to our last scene. If the security information and event management collects everything, why keep a separate data loss prevention and a separate scanner at all?
Because each does a job the security information and event management can't. The security information and event management reads and correlates what the others report, but it doesn't inspect outbound content like data loss prevention, and it doesn't actively probe for missing patches like a scanner. The security information and event management is the brain. These are the senses. You need both. And next we hit the discipline that decides whether any of it works.
Here's the fight that actually decides whether everything we just built works, because it's the one that sank Target. Their tool fired. It flagged the malware, it even captured the attacker's staging servers, the exact place the data was being shipped, and it drowned in a screen throwing thousands of alerts a day so a human swiped it away. That's alert fatigue, and the cure is alert tuning, the most underrated word in 4.4. But how hard you tune is a real argument. Kai wants to tune aggressively, cut the noise so an analyst can function. Kim wants to tune conservatively, because every rule you silence is a signal you might lose. Kai, go.
The analyst's attention is the scarce resource, full stop. If a screen shows 9,000 alerts and 8,900 are a backup job and a chatty printer, you haven't got monitoring, you've got wallpaper. Nobody reads the 9,000th line. So you raise thresholds, you whitelist the known good jobs, you suppress the chatter until what's left is worth a human's time. A quiet screen with 50 real alerts beats a screaming one with 9,000. Target didn't lack data, it lacked signal, and put a real cost on it. A Tier 1 analyst shift is finite. Every minute clearing a false alarm is a minute the real one sits unread. So noise isn't just annoying, it's expensive and it's dangerous because fatigue is a documented root cause in a lot of the big breaches. A tool that cries wolf 9,000 times trains its own humans to ignore the wolf.
Now this, and you on the fatigue, and against you on the knife. Here's my problem. The handbook is blunt. An ignored alert is the same as no alert. And every time you raise a threshold or silence a rule, you're making a bet that nothing important lives in what you just muted. Tune too hard and you turn a false positive, a harmless alarm, into a false negative. The real attack that now fires nothing at all. That's not a quieter security operations center. That's OPM. A year of silence because the one thing worth seeing got filed under noise. And here's the asymmetry that scares me. A false positive costs you an hour of investigation. A false negative can cost you the whole company. Those are not equal mistakes, so I won't trade a little less annoyance for even a small chance of blinding the one sensor that mattered. My need things we pays.
Kim, that's fair, but you can't dodge Kai's point. A drowning analyst catches nothing either. So be concrete. How do you cut the noise without going blind?
One rule at a time against known good behavior and reviewed forever. You don't blanket raise every threshold in a sweep. You take the printer that alerts hourly, you confirm it's genuinely benign, you tune that one rule, and you write down why. Slow, boring, documented. The failure mode I'm fighting is the analyst who clears the whole wall in one afternoon because it felt good.
Fine, but nobody has time to hand-tune 10,000 rules one by one.
Then you prioritize by blast radius, not by volume. Tune the noisiest low-stakes rules first. and you never touch the high-severity ones without a second set of eyes. Cites the discipline the exam is testing. Continuous tuning, not a one-time purge.
Okay, I'll concede the sequencing. My instinct is to cut fast, and cutting fast is exactly how you'd have silenced Target's real alert along with the junk. Aggressive on the noise, careful on the severity. I can live with that.
Then here's the verdict, and it's what the exam actually rewards. There's no perfect setting. Tune too loose, and your analyst drowns in false positives. Tune too tight, and a real intrusion becomes a false negative nobody sees. The professional answer is always continuous alert tuning, one rule at a time, against known good, never set and forget, and never a blanket sweep. And when a real alert does survive, you don't stop at seeing it. You quarantine, isolate the infected host from the network, but don't wipe it yet because you still need it to learn how they got in. Contain, then investigate, then remediate, then validate.
And read the scenario wording to pick the answer. If it describes a flood of alerts nobody can triage, they want tuning. If it describes an attack that fired nothing at all, that's a false negative, and over-tuning is often the cause. And if it describes an alarm that fired but turned out to be a harmless backup job, that's a false positive. Annoying but survivable. Match the story to the term, and those questions stop being guesses. And the machine doesn't end at the alert. You tune so the real one is visible. You quarantine so it can't spread. And you validate so you know it's truly gone. Detection, then response, then confirmation, every single time.
So that's the episode, in one honest line. A security information and event management does not stop attacks. People who read and act on what the security information and event management found stop attacks. OPM had a year, Target had the alert, and the missing piece was never a fancier tool. It was the last link in the chain, the human at the end actually pulling on it. Let's lock the core of this one. A security information and event management, aggregates, correlates, and alerts, but the whole pipeline lives or dies on the human reading the alert at the end. OPM had over a year, Target had the alert, and both lost everything on the last link.
And do this tonight. Open a terminal on a machine you own, run grep on failed password against your auth log, and watch your own attack surface light up. You'll never look at a log the same way again.
Next episode, we go from watching traffic to blocking it. Firewall rules and IDS versus IPS. I'll show you the one misordered rule that quietly lets an attacker straight through a firewall that looks locked down.
And don't forget the trap pairs from today. NetFlow is metadata, never payload. And SNMP, threat pushes while a poll asks. And the false negative is the silent one. The real attack that fired nothing. Those are near guaranteed points.
If this made the security information and event management finally click, hit like and subscribe so we can build the rest of this Security Plus series together, and grab the free practice quizzes at certs.professorerica.com to drill Domain 4. And here's the one only you can answer. After watching this, would your team have read that alert or swiped it away like Target did? Tell us in the comments. This is Caroline. Thanks for watching and signing off.